You think you know what cold feels like? I thought I did too. Living in Chicago, you get used to the wind cutting through your jacket. But the cold I felt that night, the night my life effectively ended and then restarted, wasn't just about the weather. It was the bone-deep chill of realizing that the people who were supposed to protect you were the ones holding the knife. It started like any other Tuesday in the Sterling household. My brother, Jake, the golden child, the star quarterback, the guy who could do no wrong, was pacing around the living room. He was 22, still living at home, waiting for his big break into the pros, which mostly consisted of him partying and driving the cars my parents bought him. I was 18, just trying to finish my high school calculus homework at the kitchen table. "John," Jake barked, snapping his fingers, "I need you to write that email to the recruiter. Now, tell him I was sick last week. That's why I missed the tryout." I didn't look up. I was tired. "Do it yourself, Jake. I have a final tomorrow." The room went silent. In our house, you didn't say no to Jake. My parents, Robert and Eleanor, had built an entire ecosystem around his ego. He was the sun and we were just the dirt he walked on. "What did you say?" Jake's voice dropped an octave. He walked over, his heavy boots thudding on the hardwood floor. "I said no," I replied, my hand shaking slightly as I gripped my pencil. "You missed the tryout because you were hungover. I'm not lying for you anymore." That was the trigger. Jake didn't argue. He didn't debate. He just reacted. He grabbed the back of my chair and yanked it. I went flying, crashing onto the floor. Before I could scramble up, he kicked me. Hard. Right in the ribs. The air left my lungs in a whoosh. "You ungrateful little rat," he spat. "You think you're better than me because you get A's? Nobody cares about your grades, John. Nobody cares about you." I tried to stand, adrenaline flooding my system. "At least I'm not a leech," I yelled back. That was a mistake. Jake grabbed my left arm. He twisted it behind my back, pushing it up, higher and higher. I screamed. "Say you're sorry," he hissed. "No!" Snap. The sound was sickeningly loud, like a dry branch breaking in a quiet forest. White-hot pain exploded in my forearm. I fell to my knees, clutching my arm, gasping for air, tears instantly blurring my vision. That's when my parents walked in. My mother, Eleanor, was wearing her pearl necklace, fresh from a charity dinner. My father, Robert, was adjusting his cufflinks. They saw me on the floor, cradling a visibly broken arm, and Jake standing over me, chest heaving. "What is going on here?" my father demanded. "John attacked me," Jake shouted immediately, pointing a finger at me. "He went crazy. He tried to hit me with the chair because I asked him to turn down his music. I had to defend myself." I looked up at them, the pain making me nauseous. "He's lying," I wheezed. "He broke my arm because I wouldn't write his email. Mom, please, I need a doctor." My mother looked at me, then she looked at Jake. I saw the calculation in her eyes. It wasn't about truth. It was never about truth. It was about image. Jake was the face of the family. I was just expenses. "Stop being so dramatic, John," my mother said, her voice icy. She walked over to Jake and brushed imaginary dust off his shoulder. "Are you hurt, baby? Did he hurt you?" "My hand hurts from where I had to block him," Jake lied, rubbing his knuckles. "You see what you've done?" My father turned on me, his face red. "You come into this house, eat our food, and then you try to assault your brother? The one who actually has a future. Dad, my arm is broken," I screamed, holding it up. The angle was wrong. It was twisted. "Don't you raise your voice at me," he roared. "I have had it with your jealousy. You've been trying to sabotage Jake since he was born. I won't have a violent thug living under my roof." Couldn't believe it. I was the one on the floor. I was the one bleeding. But in their twisted reality, I was the villain. "Get out," my father said. "What?" "You heard me. Get out. Tonight. I'm done paying for you. I'm done dealing with your attitude." "It's pouring rain outside," I stammered. "It's 30 degrees. Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem," my mother added, not even looking at me. She was too busy checking Jake's hand for bruises. Maybe a night on the streets will teach you some gratitude. My father grabbed me by the collar of my shirt. He dragged me, physically dragged me, toward the front door. Every bump sent shocks of agony through my broken arm. I scrambled, trying to get my footing, but he was a big man, and I was in shock. He opened the heavy oak door. The wind howled, carrying sheets of freezing rain into the foyer. "Wait, my stuff!" I cried. My mother appeared from the hallway. She had my old gym bag, the tattered blue one I'd had since middle school. She hadn't packed clothes. She hadn't packed my laptop. She had just shoved whatever was on the floor of my room into it. She threw the bag past me. It landed with a wet splash in a puddle on the driveway. "Here," she said. "Take your trash with you." My father shoved me. I stumbled down the front steps, slipping on the wet concrete, landing hard on my good shoulder. The rain soaked through my thin t-shirt instantly. It was freezing, a biting, numbing cold that felt like needles on my skin. I looked up. My family stood in the warm, golden light of the doorway. It looked like a Norman Rockwell painting, except for the cruelty etched on their faces. Jake stepped forward. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a set of keys. He twirled them around his finger. The Lamborghini keychain glinted in the porch light. It was his birthday present from last week. "Have a nice walk, loser," Jake sneered. "Don't worry about your room. I'm going to turn it into a trophy case." My mother put a hand on Jake's shoulder. "Come inside, Jake. You don't want to catch a cold talking to him." My father looked at me one last time. There was no regret in his eyes, only disgust. "If you call the police, John, I will make sure you never get into college. I'll ruin you. I have lawyers who can bury you before you even fill out the paperwork. Do you understand?" I didn't answer. Couldn't. My teeth were chattering too hard. The heavy door slammed shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Then the deadbolt slid into place. Click. I was alone. I stood up, cradling my broken arm against my chest to keep it stable. The rain mixed with the tears on my face. I walked over to the puddle and picked up my tattered bag. It was soaked. Everything inside was probably ruined. I looked back at the house. I could see them through the living room window. My mother was pouring wine. Jake was laughing, miming a throwing motion, probably reenacting how he threw me across the room. They looked happy. They looked relieved. That was the moment something inside me snapped, louder than my bone had. I didn't feel the cold anymore. I didn't feel the pain in my arm. All I felt was a burning, white-hot rage in the center of my chest. It was a fuel. It was a promise. I turned away from the house and started walking down the long driveway toward the dark street. I didn't know where I was going. I didn't have a coat. I didn't have money. But as I walked into the darkness, I made a vow to the freezing rain. I will survive this. And one day I am going to come back. I'm not going to yell. I'm not going to fight. I'm going to buy the ground out from under you, and I'm going to bury you in it. They thought they had just taken out the trash. They didn't realize they had just created their worst enemy. The first 48 hours were a blur of agony. I walked 4 miles to the nearest emergency room. I sat in the waiting room, dripping wet, shivering so violently the nurse thought I was having a seizure. When they asked what happened, I lied. I had to. My father's threat about the lawyers rang in my ears. I knew how powerful Robert Sterling was. He had judges on his speed dial. So, I told them I fell down some stairs at a park. They set my arm in a cast. The doctor looked at me with pity, seeing my soaked clothes and the tattered bag, but he didn't press. When I was discharged, the social worker gave me a list of shelters. "Good luck, son," she said. That was my inheritance. A list of homeless shelters and a plastic bag of painkillers. For the next 6 months, I lived in a nightmare. I slept under an overpass near the train tracks because the shelters were full or too dangerous. I learned quickly that a broken arm makes you a target on the streets. I had to fight for scraps of food. I washed dishes at a greasy diner in exchange for leftover soup. Every night, staring up at the concrete underside of the bridge, I thought about them. I thought about Jake driving his Lamborghini to parties. I thought about my mother buying new curtains while her son slept on cardboard. The hate kept me warm. One night, a man sat down next to me at the diner. He was older, wearing a frayed suit, reading a thick book on corporate law. His name was Mr. Henderson. He saw me trying to read a discarded newspaper with my one good hand. "You're a smart kid," he said, not looking up. "What are you doing washing dishes?" "Surviving," I said. "Survival is for animals," he replied, finally looking at me. "Men build. What do you want to build?" "A coffin," I said darkly. "For a dynasty." He smiled. It was a shark smile. "Then you better learn how the law works. It's the only weapon that leaves no blood on your hands." Mr. Henderson became my lifeline. He was a disbarred attorney, brilliant but an alcoholic. He taught me everything. He helped me navigate the system to get financial aid as an emancipated minor. I got my GED, then community college. I worked 3 jobs: janitor, night watchman, delivery driver. I didn't sleep. I didn't date. I didn't have fun. I just worked. I got into a state university on a full academic scholarship. I majored in accounting and pre-law. While other kids were partying, I was studying forensic accounting. I became obsessed with the flow of money. Money was the blood of the world, and if you knew how to track it, you could kill any beast by cutting off the supply. 7 years passed. I graduated top of my class. Then law school. I landed a job at the Department of Justice, specifically in the Financial Crimes Division. My salary wasn't huge at first, but my power was growing. I started building a file on the Sterling family. It wasn't hard to find the cracks. My father, Robert, ran a massive charity organization called the Sterling Foundation. On paper, they built orphanages and supported veterans. But as I dug into the public tax records, the numbers didn't add up. There were millions of dollars flowing into shell companies in the Caymans. And then there was Jake. Jake never made the NFL. He blew out his knee a year after I left. Karma works in mysterious ways. Now, he was listed as a consultant for the foundation, drawing a salary of $400,000 a year. But there was no record of him actually doing any work. I dug deeper. I found police reports that had disappeared. Assault charges against Jake that were dropped mysteriously. Settlements paid out to young women, labeled as NDA consulting fees in the ledger. My parents weren't just mean. They were criminals. They were using charity money to bribe police, silence victims, and fund their lavish lifestyle. They were stealing from orphans to buy Rolls Royces. The realization hit me like a physical blow. They had thrown me out for ruining the family image. Yet they were running a criminal enterprise. I knew I needed more than just tax returns. I needed the smoking gun. I needed the physical evidence. My big break came when I was promoted to special prosecutor for a federal task force targeting charity fraud. My boss, a hard-nosed woman named Attorney General Reynolds, called me into her office. "John," she said, tossing a file on her desk, "we have a whistleblower from a mid-sized charity in your hometown. Claims the owners are laundering money for a cartel and paying off local cops. It's a mess. I need someone who knows the area to go in quietly, assess the situation, and build a RICO case." I looked at the file name, the Sterling Foundation. My heart stopped. This was it. The universe was handing me the sword. "I'll take it," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I know the area well." "Good," she said. "You go in as an independent auditor. Don't let them know you're with the DOJ until you have the handcuffs ready. We want to catch them with their pants down." I went home to my modest apartment that night and packed. I didn't pack a tattered bag this time. I packed a custom-made Italian suit. I packed my badge. I packed a stack of subpoenas. I looked at myself in the mirror. The scrawny, terrified boy with the broken arm was gone. Staring back was a man with cold eyes and a jawline set in stone. I had spent 10 years crawling through the mud so I could walk back through their front door without knocking. "I'm coming home, Mom and Dad," I whispered to the reflection. "And I'm bringing the storm with me." Driving back into my hometown was a surreal experience. The streets looked the same, lined with the same oak trees, but the feeling was different. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the predator. I checked into the finest hotel in the city, ironically, a place my father had held his birthday parties at. I rented a black sedan, unassuming, professional. No flash. I wasn't here to show off. I was here to work. My cover was simple. I was a high-level forensic auditor hired by the state to do a routine compliance check for their tax-exempt status. It was a standard procedure that usually annoyed rich people but didn't scare them. My goal was to get inside the building, get access to their physical servers, and find the connection to the bribes. But first, I needed to see him. I needed to see Jake. I knew where he'd be. Every Friday afternoon, Jake held court at the Oak Haven Club, an exclusive country club where the elite of the town gathered to stroke each other's egos. I drove there and parked. I walked into the lounge, ordering a sparkling water. I sat in a corner booth, watching. And there he was. Jake hadn't aged well. 32, he was bloated. His face was puffy from alcohol, his hair thinning. He was loud, slamming his hand on the table, laughing at his own jokes. He was surrounded by sycophants, people who were only there because he was buying the drinks. He was wearing a flashy watch that probably cost more than my first year of tuition. Outside, I had seen it, the lime green Lamborghini Urus. It was parked across 2 handicap spots. Typical. I watched him for an hour. I saw the way he snapped at the waitress. I saw the way he grabbed the arm of a young woman who tried to walk away from him. He hadn't changed. He was still a bully. I finished my drink and walked out. As I was crossing the parking lot, I heard the roar of an engine. The green Lamborghini came tearing around the corner, way too fast. I stopped, not flinching. The car screeched to a halt inches from my legs. The window rolled down. Jake stuck his head out, his face red and sweaty. "Watch where you're walking, idiot!" he screamed. "This paint job costs more than your life." He didn't recognize me. Why would he? He remembered a scrawny, terrified teenager. He didn't recognize the 6'2" man in the tailored suit standing before him. I leaned down, resting my hands on his window frame. I looked him dead in the eye. "Nice car, Jake," I said calmly. "Be a shame if something happened to it." He blinked, confused by my lack of fear. "Do I know you?" "Not yet," I smiled. It was a cold smile. "But you will." I pushed off the car and kept walking. "Hey!" he yelled after me. "Who do you think you are? Do you know who my father is?" I didn't turn around. I just raised a hand in a lazy wave. "Oh, I know who your father is, Jake. And I know he's not going to be able to bail you out of what's coming." The next morning, I arrived at the Sterling Foundation headquarters. It was a glass monstrosity downtown. I presented my credentials to the receptionist. "I'm here to see Mr. Sterling regarding the state audit," I said. 5 minutes later, my father walked out. Robert Sterling looked older, grayer, but he still had that arrogant swagger. He extended a hand, flashing his politician smile. "Mr. Reynolds, is it?" he asked, looking at my business card, which used my middle name. "My secretary said you're here for the compliance check. We usually just have our lawyers mail the files over." "I prefer to be thorough, Mr. Sterling," I said, shaking his hand. His grip was weak. "New state regulations. We need to verify the physical assets and cross-reference the charitable outlays with the recipient database." He frowned just for a second. "That seems excessive. We do excellent work here. We just raised $3 million for the Policeman's Benevolent Fund." "I'm sure you did," I said, keeping my face neutral. "That's actually one of the funds we need to look into. There were some irregularities in the disbursement." "Irregularities?" His smile vanished. "Look, son, I don't know who sent you, but the Sterling name is spotless in this town." "I'm sure it is," I said. "Then you have nothing to hide, right?" He stared at me. For a second, I thought he recognized me. I saw a flicker of familiarity in his eyes. Maybe it was my nose, or the shape of my jaw. But he dismissed it. To him, his son John was dead, or rotting in a gutter somewhere. He couldn't conceive that the professional auditor in the $2,000 suit was the boy he threw out in the rain. "Fine," he snapped. "My assistant will set you up in the conference room. But make it quick." We have our 30th anniversary gala this weekend, and I don't want you getting in the way. Oh, I wouldn't miss the gala for the world, I said. I hear it's going to be a night to remember. He grunted and walked away. As soon as he was gone, I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. I was in. I had access. I spent the next 3 days in that conference room. But I wasn't just looking at the files they gave me. I was hacking into their internal network. I used a brute force decryption program I'd developed with a buddy at the DOJ. It took me until Thursday night to crack the encrypted partition on the main server. And there it was, the shadow ledger. It wasn't just bribery. It was massive. They were funneling money from drug cartels through the charity, cleaning it and taking a 15% cut. They were paying off judges. They were paying off the zoning commission. And then I found the Jake file. It was a subfolder. Inside were scanned copies of checks. $50,000 to S. Martinez, NDA regarding assault. $100,000 to Officer Miller, destruction of evidence, DUI. $250,000 to L. Davis, settling out of court, paternity suit. My stomach churned. They had spent millions covering up for him. Millions of dollars of dirty money to keep their golden boy shining, while I had eaten out of garbage cans. But the digital file wasn't enough. I needed a witness. I needed someone who could testify to the intent. I looked at the payroll records. I noticed a name that had been terminated abruptly 3 years ago. Martha Higgins, housekeeper, 20 years of service. I remembered Martha. She was the only person in that house who had ever snuck me a cookie or bandaged a scraped knee when my parents weren't looking. I found her address. She lived in a rundown apartment complex on the edge of town. I drove there late at night. I knocked on the door. An elderly woman opened it, peering through the chain. Yes, Martha, I said softly. It's John. John Sterling. Her eyes went wide. She unlatched the door and opened it. She gasped, covering her mouth. Johnny? She whispered. Oh, my sweet boy. We thought you were dead. She pulled me into a hug. She smelled like lavender and old paper. It was the first time a mother figure had hugged me in 10 years. I sat in her small kitchen and drank tea. I told her I was okay. Then I asked her why she was fired. Her face darkened. I saw something I wasn't supposed to, Johnny. I saw your mother burning papers in the fireplace. But one didn't burn. It was a notebook. I fished it out after she left. My heart started pounding. Do you still have it? I kept it, she said. I knew they were evil. I kept it in case you ever came back. She went to her bedroom and returned with a charred, black notebook. I opened it. It was my mother's handwriting. It was a diary of payments. It detailed the bribes. It detailed the hate. There was an entry from the night they kicked me out. Finally got rid of the spare. Now we can focus on Jake's career without distractions. Robert paid the police chief to ignore any calls from John. I closed the book. My hands were trembling, not with fear, but with the sheer weight of the weapon I was now holding. Thank you, Martha, I said, standing up. You just saved the world. What are you going to do, Johnny? She asked. I'm going to the gala, I said, and I'm going to give a speech. With Martha's diary and the digital ledger secured, I had enough to put them away for life. But I wanted more than prison. I wanted total destruction. I wanted to dismantle their reputation so thoroughly that even the rats wouldn't want to be associated with the name Sterling. I had 24 hours before the gala. I called in my team. Agent Reynolds, I said into the phone. It's a go. I need the assets frozen at exactly 8 p.m. tomorrow night. I need the warrants signed. And bring the SWAT team. They have armed private security. You got it, John, she said. Be careful. If they figure out who you are before the raid, you're in danger. They won't, I said. They're too busy celebrating themselves. I spent the next day meeting with the victims listed in the files. This was the hardest part. I met Sarah Martinez at a coffee shop. She was scarred, both physically and emotionally. When I told her who I was and what I was doing, she wept. I thought I was alone, she said. Your parents, they told me they'd kill my dog if I spoke up. They gave me cash and made me sign a paper. That paper is void, I told her, handing her a subpoena. This is your chance, Sarah. You don't have to be afraid anymore. I am the law now, and I am telling you, they can't hurt you. I gathered 5 victims. 5 women whose lives Jake had ruined. I didn't ask them to come to the gala, it was too dangerous. I just asked for their sworn affidavits. They gave them to me willingly. By Saturday afternoon, the pieces were in place. I went to a high-end tailor and bought a tuxedo. Midnight blue. Sharp. Expensive. I wanted to look like the Prince of Darkness coming to claim his due. I looked at the invitation I had confiscated from the office. The Sterling Foundation, 30 years of excellence. Black tie. I drove to the venue, the grand ballroom of the Ritz. The parking lot was full of Bentleys, Ferraris, and of course the green Lamborghini Urus, parked right in front on the red carpet. I parked my rental sedan around the back. I met up with Detective Miller, a good cop from the state police who I had looped in, bypassing the corrupt local chief. We have the perimeter secured, Miller said. My guys are in plain clothes inside as waiters. We're waiting for your signal. The signal is when I drop the mic, I said. I adjusted my cufflinks. I checked the inside pocket of my jacket where the warrant was folded. I took a deep breath. Let's go to a party. The ballroom was suffocatingly opulent. Crystal chandeliers the size of small cars hung from the ceiling. Tables were draped in silk. The centerpiece of every table was a massive bouquet of white orchids, my mother's favorite. The room smelled of expensive perfume and hypocrisy. There were 300 people there. The mayor, the judges, the business tycoons. All the people who had looked the other way for decades. I stood in the shadows near the back, watching. My father was on stage, holding a microphone. He looked regal. My mother stood beside him, beaming, clutching a bouquet of roses. Jake was there too, looking bored, texting on his phone, leaning against the podium like he owned the place. Thank you, everyone, Robert boomed. His voice amplified across the hall. 30 years. It's a long time. When Eleanor and I started this foundation, we had a dream. A dream of a community where everyone helps everyone. The crowd applauded politely. We have faced challenges, he continued, but we have always put family first. And looking at my son, Jake, I know the future is in good hands. He gestured to Jake. Jake gave a lazy wave. We have raised $5 million tonight, Robert announced. And I am proud to say, every cent will go to worthy causes. That was my cue. I started walking down the center aisle. My footsteps were silent on the plush carpet, but my presence was heavy. Actually, Robert, I shouted, my voice cutting through the applause. That's not entirely true, is it? The room went deadly silent. Heads turned. 300 pairs of eyes focused on me. My father squinted against the spotlight. Excuse me? Who is that? Security. I kept walking. I stepped into the light. You don't recognize me, Dad? I asked. It's been 10 years. I guess I look a little different without the broken arm. My mother dropped her bouquet. The roses scattered on the floor. Her hand flew to her throat. John. A murmur ripped through the crowd. The lost son? The one who ran away. John? My father said, his voice trembling with a mix of shock and rage. What the hell are you doing here? Get out. Security. Remove this trespasser. 2 burly security guards started toward me. Federal agent, I shouted, flashing my badge high in the air. Anyone who touches me will be charged with obstruction of justice. The guards froze. They looked at my badge, then at my father. They stepped back. They weren't paid enough to fight the feds. I walked up the stairs to the stage. I stood 5 feet away from them, the same distance as that night in the foyer. But now I was the one in control. What is this? Jake stepped forward, puffing his chest out. You think a fake badge scares us? Get lost, loser. I ignored him. I looked at the crowd. I grabbed the microphone from the stand. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice steady and cold. My name is John Sterling. I am a special prosecutor for the Department of Justice. And tonight, we are celebrating a different kind of anniversary. I pulled a remote clicker from my pocket and pointed it at the giant projection screen behind them, which was displaying the foundation's logo. Click. The screen changed. It wasn't a logo anymore. It was a spreadsheet. The shadow ledger. This, I pointed, is a record of illegal payments made by the Sterling Foundation. Money laundering for the cartel. Bribes to Judge Stevens. Bribes to Chief of Police Higgins. I saw the police chief in the front row turn pale and start looking for the exit. Sit down, Chief, I commanded. My men are already at the doors. State troopers in tactical gear burst through the double doors, lining the walls. The room erupted in gasps and screams. I turned back to my parents. They looked small. They looked terrified. You lied to everyone, I said to them. You told them I was a runaway. You told them I was crazy. But the truth is, you kicked an injured 18-year-old out into the rain to protect him. Pointed at Jake. A predator. A abuser. Click. The screen changed again. It was a video. The video from the dashboard camera of the Lamborghini. A file Jake thought he had deleted. But the cloud never forgets. It showed Jake laughing with a friend. Voice on video, Jake, yeah, I hit her. So what? Dad paid her off. I can do whatever I want. I'm a Sterling. We own this town. The crowd gasped. A collective noise of disgust filled the room. Jake lunged at me. I'll kill you. I didn't flinch. As he swung, I sidestepped, grabbed his wrist, the same move he used on me years ago, and twisted. I slammed him face first onto the stage floor. You have the right to remain silent, I whispered in his ear. Detective Miller rushed the stage and slapped cuffs on Jake. I stood up and faced my parents. My father was shaking. My mother was crying. Not fake tears this time, but real ugly tears of ruin. John, my father stammered. John, please, we can talk about this. We can make a deal. I have money. I can give you half. Just turn off the screen. I looked at him. I looked at the man who dragged me across the floor. I don't want your money, Robert, I said. I want your legacy. I pulled out the warrants. Robert Sterling, Eleanor Sterling. You are under arrest for racketeering, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and charity fraud. Your assets have been frozen. Your accounts have been seized. The show is over. My mother reached out to me, her hand trembling. John, I'm your mother. Please, don't do this to your family. I looked her dead in the eye. Family? I asked. I don't have a family. I remember a woman who threw a tattered bag into a puddle and told me I was trash. You made your choice that night, Eleanor. Tonight, I'm making mine. I nodded to the officers. Take them away. As the police led them off the stage in handcuffs, flashing cameras capturing every second of their humiliation, I didn't feel joy. I felt a heavy, deep satisfaction, like setting down a weight I had been carrying for 10 years. I looked at the crowd, who were staring at me in stunned silence. Enjoy the dessert, I said. I hear it was paid for with stolen money. I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a thud. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Because I had involved the feds, there was no local judge to bail them out. They were denied bond due to being a flight risk, thanks to those Cayman accounts I uncovered. The next morning, I stood on the sidewalk outside the Sterling mansion. It was a chaotic scene. U.S. Marshals were tagging everything. Movers were carrying out paintings, statues, furniture. And then came the cars. I watched as a tow truck hooked up the Rolls-Royce Cullinan. My father loved that car more than he loved me. Seeing it dragged up the ramp, covered in dust, felt poetic. Then came the Lamborghini Urus, the green monster, the symbol of Jake's immunity. It was loaded onto a flatbed. It would be auctioned off to pay back the victims. I felt a presence beside me. It was Martha, the housekeeper. You did it, Johnny, she said softly. You really did it. We did it, Martha, I said. 2 days later, I went to visit them at the Federal Detention Center. I didn't have to, but I needed closure. I visited Jake first. He was in a solitary cell because he had already tried to fight a guard. He looked pathetic in an orange jumpsuit, without his hair gel, without his expensive watch. He looked up at me through the plexiglass. "You think you won?" he sneered, but his voice cracked. "When I get out of here." "You're not getting out, Jake," I said, leaning into the microphone. "I found the drug money. That's a 20-year mandatory minimum. And with the assault charges I reinstated, you'll be 50 before you see the sun again. And by then, nobody will remember your name." He started screaming, slamming his fists against the glass. I just hung up the phone and walked away. Then I went to see my parents. They were in an interrogation room, sitting at a metal table. They looked shrunken, aged 10 years in 2 days. When I walked in, my father stood up. "John," he said, trying to summon some authority. "You need to fix this. Call the governor. Tell them it was a mistake." "It wasn't a mistake," I said, sitting down. "It was justice. We gave you life." My mother sobbed. "How can you be so ungrateful?" "You gave me life," I agreed. "And then you tried to destroy it. You chose a monster over your son because he could throw a ball and I was just a nerd. You valued image over morality." I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out a photograph. It was a picture of me taken 10 years ago by a shelter volunteer. I was skinny, dirty, holding that tattered blue gym bag. I slid the photo across the table. "You threw me out with a bag of trash," I said. "So I'm returning the favor. The house is gone. The cars are gone. The foundation is gone. The money is gone. You are penniless. And you are going to die in prison." My father looked at the photo. His hands shook. For the first time, the reality hit him. He wasn't Robert Sterling, the tycoon, anymore. He was just an old criminal who had underestimated his victim. "Why?" he whispered. "Why go this far?" "Because..." I stood up, buttoning my jacket. "You told me I would never be anything. I just wanted to show you that I became the one thing you couldn't buy." I turned to the door. "John!" my mother cried out. "John, wait. What are we supposed to do?" I paused, hand on the doorknob. I looked back at them one last time. "I don't know," I said, echoing the words she said to me that rainy night. "That's not my problem." I walked out. The door clicked shut behind me. The heavy, metallic sound of a lock sliding into place. But this time I was on the outside and I was free. I walked out of the prison and into the sunlight. The air was warm. The sky was blue. I took a deep breath. It was over. The ghost of the freezing night was gone. Time is a funny thing. When I was shivering under that bridge, 10 minutes felt like 10 years. But the year following the arrest of my family, it moved like a fast-flowing river, washing away the grime of the past. The trial was the media circus everyone expected. My parents, Robert and Eleanor, turned on each other with a viciousness that shocked even the tabloids. It turns out, loyalty in the Sterling family was exactly what I always suspected. A transaction. Once the bank accounts were frozen and the salary payments stopped, the love evaporated. My mother claimed she was a victim of my father's controlling nature. My father claimed she was the mastermind behind the money laundering. Watching them tear each other apart in court, blaming one another to avoid a longer sentence, was the final confirmation I needed. They didn't love Jake. They didn't love each other. They only loved the reflection of themselves they saw in the mirror. The jury didn't buy any of it. Jake was sentenced to 25 years. The judge added a special stipulation regarding the violent nature of his crimes, ensuring he wouldn't be eligible for parole until he was nearly 50. My parents got 15 years each. I remember sitting in the back of the courtroom when the gavel came down. I didn't cheer. I didn't smile. I just exhaled. It was a breath I felt like I had been holding since I was 18 years old. But the real story isn't about them going to prison. It's about what I did with my freedom. After the trial, I was offered a massive promotion at the DOJ. They wanted to make me the face of the anti-corruption unit in D.C. It came with a corner office, a 6-figure salary, and enough prestige to bury my past forever. I turned it down. My boss, Agent Reynolds, thought I was crazy. "John," she said. You're the golden boy of the department right now. You can write your own ticket. I'm tired of golden boys, I told her. I have work to do here. You see, during the investigation, we seized millions in assets. The Lamborghini, the Rolls-Royce, the mansion, the jewelry, it was all liquidated by the state. As the primary whistleblower and lead investigator who uncovered the tax fraud, I was entitled to a percentage of the recovered funds. It's a standard government incentive to encourage people to report massive fraud. When the check arrived, I stared at it. It was more money than I had ever seen. It was essentially my inheritance, paid out in the ashes of their destruction. My first instinct was to burn it. That money was cursed. Came from bribes, from fear, from the suffering of people like Sarah Martinez. But then I remembered something Mr. Henderson, the man who taught me law in the diner, used to say, "Money has no soul, John. It takes on the spirit of the hand that holds it." So I decided to clean it. I bought a building, not a mansion. It was an old, abandoned warehouse on the east side of town. The rough part, not far from where I used to sleep on the streets. I hired contractors. I hired teachers. I hired therapists. We called it the Lighthouse. It wasn't just a shelter. It was a comprehensive center for at-risk youth, specifically those aging out of the foster system or running from abusive homes. We offered legal counsel for kids stuck in brutal custody battles. We provided college fund scholarships for kids who had the grades but not the money. We gave them what I never had, a safety net. One afternoon, about 6 months after we opened, I was walking through the main hall. I saw a kid sitting in the corner. He was maybe 16, skinny, wearing a hoodie that was too big for him. He was holding his arm awkwardly against his chest. I walked over and sat down next to him. "Hey," I said. "I'm John." He flinched. "I didn't steal anything," he mumbled. "I know," I said. "Does your arm hurt?" He looked down. "My stepdad. He got mad because I didn't wash the truck right." I felt that old rage spark in my chest, but I tamped it down. Rage wouldn't help this kid. Action would. "You know," I said, rolling up my sleeve to show the faint surgical scar on my forearm where the doctors had to reset my bone years ago. "I had a break just like that when I was a little older than you." His eyes went wide. Yeah, hurt like hell. But the bone healed stronger than it was before." I looked him in the eye. "You're safe here, Leo. We have a lawyer on staff who specializes in this. You aren't going back there." Watching Leo get the cast he needed, watching him eat a warm meal without looking over his shoulder, that was better than any courtroom victory. That was the real win. And I didn't do it alone. Sarah, the lawyer friend who had stood by me when I was nobody, became my partner in every sense of the word. She quit her corporate job to run the legal clinic at the Lighthouse. We spent our days fighting for kids and our nights trying to figure out how to cook dinner without burning the apartment down. We didn't live in a mansion. We bought a fixer-upper, a small 2-bedroom house with a big porch. I traded the sleek black government sedan for a Ford F-150 truck. It wasn't fast, it wasn't flashy, but it could haul lumber for the center and groceries for the food bank. It was useful. One evening, Sarah and I were sitting on the porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of purple and orange. "You got a letter today," Sarah said, handing me an envelope. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was my mother's. The return address was the Federal Correctional Facility. I didn't open it. I didn't even hesitate. I took a lighter from my pocket, the one I used to light the grill, and set the corner of the envelope on fire. I dropped it into the metal ashtray and watched it turn to ash. "You don't want to know what she said?" Sarah asked softly. "I already know," I said. "She wants money, or she wants forgiveness, or she wants to blame me. It doesn't matter. They don't get to live in my head anymore. They don't pay rent there." Sarah smiled and reached over to take my hand. "You're a good man, John Sterling." "I'm working on it," I said. I reached into my pocket. I had been carrying a small velvet box around for 3 weeks, waiting for the right moment. There were no paparazzi here, no grand gestures, no Rolls-Royce waiting to whisk us away, just a porch, a dog barking in the distance, and the woman who had seen me when I was invisible. "Sarah," I said, sliding off the bench to one knee. She gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "I don't have a dynasty to offer you," I said. "I don't have an empire. But I promise you, I will never let you face the rain alone. Will you marry me?" She didn't say yes immediately. She just tackled me in a hug that nearly knocked me off the porch. We got married 2 months later in the backyard of the lighthouse. The guests weren't senators or CEOs. They were the kids from the center. Leo was my ring bearer. Martha, the housekeeper who saved the diary, sat in the front row, crying into a handkerchief. It was the poorest wedding in terms of budget, but the richest in terms of love. As I danced with Sarah under the string lights, I realized that my parents were wrong about everything. They thought power came from fear. They thought respect was something you bought. They thought legacy was a name on a building. They were rotting in cells, divorced, alone, bankrupt. Their friends had abandoned them the second the indictment dropped. I was dancing in a backyard, surrounded by people who would take a bullet for me, not because I paid them, but because I served them. I looked at my watch. A simple Timex, not a Rolex. It was time to cut the cake. I was free. A few weeks ago, I took a drive. I told Sarah I had one last errand to run. I drove my truck out to the old neighborhood. It was strange how small everything looked now. When you're a scared kid, the world looks like a labyrinth of giants. When you're a grown man who has stared down the barrel of corruption and won, it just looks like suburbs. I pulled up to the address. 1402 Oakwood Drive. The mansion was gone. After the bank seized it, they tried to sell it, but the reputation of the house was so toxic, the rumors of the House of Secrets, that no one wanted to live there. Eventually, a developer bought the land just for the lot value. They had bulldozed it. Where the grand foyer once stood, there was just a pile of dirt. The window where Jake used to mock me was empty air. The driveway where my father dragged me was cracked and overgrown with weeds. I turned off the truck and stepped out. The air was crisp. It wasn't raining this time. I walked over to the spot where I calculated the front door used to be. I closed my eyes and listened. I half expected to hear the echoes of shouting, the phantom pain in my arm. But there was nothing. Just the sound of wind in the trees and a lawnmower in the distance. The monster wasn't real anymore. It was just a story. I thought about the concept of the golden child. My parents had sacrificed everything. Their morality, their finances, their other son, to build an altar to Jake. They poured all their hopes, their narcissism, and their greed into him. They protected him from every consequence, shielded him from every reality. And in doing so, they destroyed him. Jake never learned to be a human being. He never learned empathy, or resilience, or hard work. He was a product. And when the product became defective, the factory shut down. In a twisted way, I was the lucky one. By throwing me out, by breaking me, they forced me to rebuild myself. They gave me the gift of struggle. They made me learn how to survive the cold. They stripped away my entitlement and replaced it with hunger. I walked over to where the garage used to be. I remembered the Lamborghini sitting there. A shiny green symbol of everything wrong with my family. I kicked a loose piece of rubble. I realized then that I didn't hate them anymore. Hate requires energy. Hate requires you to care. What I felt was a profound, distant pity. They were tragic figures in a play they didn't know was a tragedy. They thought they were the kings and queens, but they were just the jesters. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Sarah. Leo got his acceptance letter to community college. We're ordering pizza to celebrate. Come home. Come home. 2 simple words. But they meant more to me than the entire sterling fortune. I looked at the empty lot one last time. Goodbye, I whispered. Not to my parents, but to the boy who used to live here. The boy who thought he was worthless. The boy who begged for love from people capable only of transaction. I turned around and walked back to my truck. I didn't look in the rearview mirror as I drove away. There was nothing behind me worth looking at. The road ahead was wide open. And for the first time in my life, I was driving the car. And that, my friends, is how I took down the dynasty that tried to erase me. But before you go, I want to leave you with a few thoughts that I learned the hard way. First, DNA does not make a family. Just because you share blood with someone doesn't mean you owe them your soul. If your family is toxic, if they abuse you, if they value their image more than your safety, you have every right to walk away. Walking away isn't quitting. It's surviving. Second, enabling is a form of abuse. My parents thought they were loving Jake by covering up his crimes. They weren't. They were crippling him. By removing all consequences, they turned him into a monster who couldn't function in society. Real love involves accountability. And finally, your trauma is not your destiny. They broke my arm and they broke my heart, but they couldn't break my spirit. You can build a beautiful life out of broken pieces. The best revenge isn't seeing them in handcuffs, though that was satisfying. The best revenge is being happy. It's healing. It's breaking the cycle. I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to cut ties with a toxic family member to save yourself? Or maybe you've been the scapegoat in your family. Let me know your story in the comments. And if you think justice was served in this story, drop a simple good in the comments so I know we're on the same page. Stay strong, stay safe, and remember, you define your own worth. Thanks for watching.
But there's an interesting challenge where I think people need to avoid becoming a suffering addict, sort of using suffering as the proxy for progress as opposed to the outcome of the suffering, right? It's like I was in pain not eating the marshmallow. I was in pain doing this work. I have attached well-being and satisfaction to pain, not to what the pain gets me on the other side of it.
If you define pain as physical pain, then it's a real thing. It happens and you can't ignore it. But that's not what we mean by suffering. Suffering is mostly mental anguish and mental pain. And it just means you don't want to do the task at hand. If you were fine doing the task at hand, then you wouldn't be suffering. And then the question is, what's more effective, to suffer along the way or just to interpret it in a way that is not suffering? You hear from a lot of successful people, they look back and they say, oh, the journey was the fun part, right? That was actually the entertaining part and I should have enjoyed it more. It's a common regret. There's a little thought exercise I like to do, which is you can go back into your own life and try to put yourself in the exact position you were in 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago. And you try to remember, okay, who was I with? What was I doing? What was I feeling? What were my emotions? What were my objectives? And really try to transport yourself back and see if there's any advice you'd give yourself, anything you'd do differently. Now, you don't have new information. Don't pretend you could have gone back and, bought a stock or bought Bitcoin or whatever. But just knowing what you know now in terms of your temperament and a little bit of age-related experience, how would you have done things differently? And I think it's a worthwhile exercise to do. So don't let me rob you of the conclusion. But I'll tell you, for me, I would have done everything the same, except I would have done it with less anger, less emotion, less internal suffering, because that was optional. It wasn't necessary. And I would argue that someone who can do the job at least peacefully, but maybe happily, is going to be more effective than someone who has unnecessary emotional turmoil.
Well, you end up with a series of miserable successes, right? The outcome may have been the same, but the entire experience of getting there.
And the journey is not only the reward, the journey is the only thing there is. Even success, it's human nature to bank it very, very quickly, right? Because the normal loop that we run through is you sit around, you're bored, then you want something. Then when you want something, you decide you're not going to be happy until you get that thing. Then you start your bout of suffering or anticipation while you strive to get that thing. If you get that thing, then you get used to it. And then you get bored again. Then a few months later, you want something else. And if you don't get it, then you're unhappy for a bit. And then you get over it. And then you want something else, right? That's the normal cycle. So whether you're happy or unhappy at the end, it tends not to last. Now, I don't want to be glib and say that, oh, there's no point in making money or being successful. There absolutely is. Money solves all your money problems. So it is good to have money. That said, there are those stories. I don't know if you've seen those studies. I don't know how real these are. A lot of these psych studies don't replicate, but it's a fun little study that shows that people who break their back and people who win the lottery are back to their baseline happiness 2 years later.
Yep.
Again, I don't know if that's entirely true. I think money can buy you happiness if you earned it. because then along the way, you have both pride and confidence in yourself, and you have a sense of accomplishment, and you know, set out to do something and you were right. So I'll bet that lingers. And then, as I said, money solves your money problem. So I don't want to be too glib about it, but I would say in general, this loop that we run through, of desire, dopamine,